The story of my life and interesting people I know. Today, I am very pleased to welcome a very interesting person that I have known along my life, and it's been probably a decade since I've talked to her. Welcome to Cowboys Not Eggheads, Dorinda Verhoff, or Dorinda Moss Verhoff. I think it's been so long since I've talked to you. You used to be a Moss. It's been a while, huh?
Has been a while. I've been married 10 years.
There you go. I think it was 10 years ago was the last time I talked to you. That's insane.
It
That's
is kind of
crazy.
crazy.
That's crazy.
I know.
So the reason I had Dorinda on today is because Dorinda fascinated me. I knew her very early in her career. Do you mind telling me how old you were when you went to the Republican National Committee? You're
In
23?
2001? Oh no,
Yeah.
I was 26.
Oh, were you? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But it was one of your first job was equivalent of my job, and that was you're the finance director of the Tennessee Republican Party, right?
Mm-hmm. I was 23 during that when I started
Okay.
that job. But when we worked together at the RNC, I was 26.
Okay. But from a very so I was I think 34 or something. I think I've got 8 years on you. But from an early age, Dorinda, from her early in her career, Dorinda was somebody that I just admired immediately, and I think it's because of her determination and confidence and willingness to get things done quickly and efficiently. And nowadays people that are in their 20s don't operate that way. It seems. Maybe I'm wrong. There are some good ones, but Dorinda never had to have a Bing bag that I'm aware of,
What's
right?
that? I don't know what that is.
Oh, they have Bing bags for people now for kids that are in their 20s. They have Bing bags and free food and at these corporations and stuff.
Oh, right, right, right. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not somebody that ever begged for a Bing bag that I'm aware of. Um,
No.
and I just remember Dorinda, we both started at the RNC at the same time, and immediately you were given a special assignment to go work on a congressional race. Um, we won't mention it unless you want to, but I just thought, man, I'm glad I wasn't, and I had 8 years of experience on you, and I was like, man, I'm glad I wasn't put in that position, and you were just ready, fire, aim, man, all the way, and did a really good job, bang up job, and just somebody that I admired from afar. And then it's been a pleasure to watch you during your career. Dorinda is what I would describe as a national political operative who has held some very, very important and prestigious jobs at the national level. We're talking about finance director for a presidential campaign, finance director for the National Republican Senatorial Committee. What am I missing, Dorinda? I mean, you've held some big jobs, right?
Those are probably the biggest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but so I just want to visit you with you today a little bit about maybe give some of my younger listeners. I'm trying to get some younger listeners, Dorinda, because believe it or not, my demographic is like 40 to 55 males. So we're trying to get off that track and
Okay.
try. And so we're talking to my nieces and nephews today. I've got several of them, and they're in their 20s, and just to just visit a little bit today about expectations of folks when they start in the workforce and how they should approach it and all that good jazz. So I appreciate you joining. I think you're an expert at this field, so this is going to be fun. Are you ready to
Uh,
have some fun, Dorinda?
okay. I'm always up
Okay,
for fun.
okay. Can you um, the can you give me a defining moment in your 20s that you thought maybe determined your career path?
Um, that's a good question. I wouldn't say necessarily a moment, but certainly a person. Um, uh, Two people specifically. One, when I was in my very early 20s, my first job in politics was as an intern for Fred Thompson's reelection campaign to the Senate in 1996. And the finance director on that campaign saw me sort of floundering, trying to answer the phone at the front desk, which I was terrible at. And she brought me into her office and said, what are you doing here? What do you want to do? And I was like, I'll do whatever you let me do. And she gave me a fundraising event to execute. She was like, it's easy. Most of the work's already done. I won't let you screw it up. And that was, gosh, almost 30 years ago. And I sort of took to it, and that was my career from then on.
So you kind of landed in the right place at the right time. Did you have any mentors early on that maybe helped you steer you a little bit?
Sure. This lady's name was Dina Beaumont. She was fantastic. And she really let me kind of run with a lot of projects that were way outside of, my scope of experience. But, I was there, I was available, and I was willing, and I wanted to learn. And so she taught me, and she was really supportive, and she made sure that I didn't, screw up too badly. That race was not exactly what I would consider competitive. So it wasn't like we had a ton to lose. But I really was able to kind of cut my teeth in a really significant way in a very safe space. And I'll always be grateful to her for that. The other person, when we were working at the RNC together in the '02 cycle, was Kelly Robertson, who was one of my RPDs, and she really pushed me to pursue a job on the Bush reelection campaign and to move to Washington, which was something I did not want to do. I was very happy living my life in Tennessee. I loved my job at the RNC.
It was a great gig, wasn't it? It's a fun job.
It's still the best job I've ever had. Don't tell my kids, but like that, it was a great job, and I loved it. And at that time of my life, it was perfect for me. So, but she really pushed me to do that, and I'm glad she did.
When you left, because you weren't there that long, like maybe a year?
No, 2 years.
Was it 2? Okay.
2 years to the day, actually, yeah.
Okay, 2 years. When you left, it surprised me. And I thought, at the time in my career path, I thought, she's got big kahunas. That's really what I thought. And again, it was one of those moments where I thought, man, Brenda's braver than I am. Where do you get your bravery from?
Oh, I don't know that it was brave necessarily. I think at that point in my life, my bravery just came from my naivete. I didn't know enough about life to be afraid of anything.
I love it.
And I knew that the people I was going to be working with and for were going to help me. And I was in love with George W. Bush, and I really felt like it, being a part of that organization was going to be good for me and good for the country. And so I took a pay cut and doubled my cost of living expenses and moved to DC.
See, I didn't realize that you took a pay cut to do that. I would have
significant pay cut.
Had I known that, I would have talked you out of it.
Well, Kelly had to talk me into it. She really did, because I
didn't know that story. That's interesting.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. Like, I got a really good gig. I just got a raise. Like, I was, I was about to buy a house, and like, I was like, I don't want to live in DC. And
you didn't want to live in DC. That was the biggest thing that surprised me. For listeners, Dorinda is from Tennessee, right? And you're not an egghead, you're a cowgirl, right?
I don't know about that. It's been a minute since I've been on a horse, but yeah. I didn't want to live here.
That's your background. DC looked very foreign to you, and it surprised me. I remember thinking, I'm really surprised that she wants to live in DC.
Me too. I fully intended to come back. I was like, you know what? I'm going to finish this. I'm going to finish the campaign, and I'll be right back in Nashville and go on about my merry way. But people kept giving me jobs.
Well, you were damn good at what you did. They didn't let you out.
21 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here in lovely Falls Church, Virginia, which is where I live now with my husband and my two kids.
Yeah. What what was the biggest challenge you faced as a young professional, and how did you overcome it?
Biggest challenge. You know, primarily, I think most of my challenges were all internal, especially as a young professional, because, um, particularly once I got to DC, I felt a little bit of an imposter syndrome. Like, I don't belong here with these people. They are all very well connected. They come from wealthy families. They have fancy educations. And I felt like I really had to, prove that I belonged there too. So I really took a lot of that on and worked extra hard. It was like, I want to stand out among these people because I don't, if things go south, I don't want them to say, well, it's that girl. She doesn't belong here. So let's get rid of her. And so I think that was more of an internal challenge for me than anything external.
Hmm.
I never felt that from people. Like I didn't get it. All the people that I worked with were so wonderful and accepting and supportive and really made me feel like a valued part of the team. Those feelings were more sort of internal for me as opposed to anything external.
Um,
That and I was just really poor.
that's very vulnerable of you, Demos. I mean, I never thought of you as someone who was vulnerable.
Well,
I
I
had no idea.
well, I didn't at the time either. And it's only 20 years later when I can look back on this and acknowledge, my weakness. When you're in the middle of that stuff, if particularly in politics, you can't acknowledge any type of vulnerability or weakness because
No.
people will take
Mm-mm.
advantage of that. So I
Yeah.
couldn't say 20 years ago, I'm extremely anxious and I have, I struggle with all of these internal issues because people would say, all right, she's nuts, she's out. Um, so I had to sort of deal with all that internally. The other big challenge I had was that I was just really poor. I was broke all the time. I didn't get paid very much and I worked all the time and I lived in a very expensive place. So I had a ton of student loans, which I paid every penny back um, over the years. But like it's hard when you're starting out because you just don't have any money. And that
Was
was
it
me.
worth it? Was the sacrifice worth it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
my career in fundraising, which I officially retired from fundraising about 5 years ago. Um,
Oh, you did. You finally saw the light, huh?
yeah, I did. Um, it just introduced me to so many things and so many amazing experiences and wonderful people that I just wouldn't trade for anything. So like I would never get to know Sam Fisher of the Valentine Fishers. That would never be,
I can't believe you even know that.
of course. So, and I'm grateful for all of those things. I mean, I worked for the President of the United States. Like, I saw him a lot. I mean, he was always unhappy when he saw me because he was doing something he didn't want to do. It's not like we were pals, but, I got to see that and be a part of that. And,
Hmm.
Dick Cheney asked me to marry my husband. And so, like, all of those things I would not have had if it hadn't been for, my job in fundraising. So,
Yeah. Incredible. So what are you up to these days? You're in business development, which tells me you're basically taking all these connections that you used to be scared of and are parlaying them. Is that correct? What do you do?
that's basically it. I mean, it's basically being kind of like a fundraiser, but for my public affairs and public relations firm. I've been doing that for, about 6 or 7 years now, I guess. I work with some folks that I worked with during the 2016 cycle for Senator Rubio when he was running for president. They're really great guys. And I work with a lot of really energetic, creative, fun young people, which gives me a lot of energy. I don't work full time in the office, but the time that I do spend there is, I think, well spent.
How do you think that um, and I don't mean to make fun of millennial. You're not a millennial. You're at the end of X, aren't you? You're Gen X, right? Yeah. So how was it adapting to working with millennials? And I just knowing you and you're knowing your no bullshit, no nonsense attitude. I remember one time you and I were doing a finance school, and I think I came in a day late or something, and I said something to the effect of, if we could just get them to think outside the box a little bit, and you were just like, I just wish we could get them to think. Um,
Sounds like
uh,
something I might say. I don't remember it, but maybe.
yeah,
That's
I
right.
remember it. I remember it because it's hilarious. But how was it for you this new and this Gen Z now, and a lot of these folks they grew up with instant gratification, and a lot of them expect a lot of big things very quickly, big titles, big salaries, big all of it. How has that been for you adapting? I've mentioned this several times on this podcast, but I actually took a class on how to manage millennials because I didn't know how to do it. How has that been for you? Um, have you softened a little in your old age, or well, you're not old, but I mean, have you softened a little bit in your from your years of experience?
You know, I look at it a little bit differently in that I think it's about more about the individual as opposed to the
A group.
generation
Yeah,
as a group.
I agree.
And as a manager, I don't have as much hands-on management today as I did, let's say 10 years ago when I was at the Senate committee. Um, I think you have to look at each individual who's a part of your team and figure out what their motivations are and what really makes them tick. And I think as a manager, if you spend time getting to know them beyond just their work performance, then you can adjust to get the best work product out of each individual. So that's kind of the way I look at it. I do think that there are some insane expectations, particularly after COVID, where everybody wants to work from home and they all want to make $150,000 and they, want a gym membership and all these things. But I don't think that you get very far sort of by talking about the good old days. And, well, when I started out, I was making 23 grand and absolutely true. But it definitely gives off kind of I had to walk 2 miles in the snow vibe. And I don't think people respond very well to
They
that.
don't care. Yeah, I mean, they don't care.
Yeah. And I think putting it in perspective too, to say, people say, well, you have a really good setup here. And I'm like, yeah, but I've been at this for 30 years,
You earned it, dear.
Yeah, like they're not paying me for what I'm doing today. They're paying me for what I've been doing for the last 30 years. So,
Bingo.
that's the difference. And some people get that and they stick around. And the ones that don't will hop around and be very unfulfilled professionally for a long time, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so I mean, I guess you had mentors, but I'm trying to think like if I were a 23-year-old millennial, when I was 23, it was a long time ago. I guess it's more than 30 years ago, but certainly no one managed me in the description that you described. I mean,
They didn't.
I mean, but how were you managed? I mean, my expectation is kind of like yours is like, give me the support. I just need the support. I've always been a big loyalty guy, and to me, loyalty works as a two-way street. It only
Mm-hmm.
works if both parties are involved. Um, but even young kids when they weren't even millennials I manage, I told them that it's like you've got to be resourceful. That's something you and I used to talk about a lot too. It's just
Yeah.
in politics you've got to be resourceful. What does that mean? It means you have to understand that you have to fix problems and you have to fix them quickly and without hesitation. And it's just I mean, I think I'm blessed the way that I was managed coming up, and clearly the world's not going to go to crap just because people are managed differently now. But it's just kind of interesting to think, how would I have turned out differently in my career path had I been a millennial or a Z and been managed, in a different way. I just think it's interesting to look at that. I would be more of an egghead. The cowboy got me by.
Maybe. I don't know. That's an interesting perspective that I don't know that I've thought of. I mean,
I didn't
I'm
either until I just brought it up, but it's genius, isn't it?
fantastic. Let's write a
Yeah,
paper about it.
let's
Um,
or have a
no,
podcast.
I had great managers, and I also had a few that were really bad. So I really
Why were
learned
they
from
bad?
that.
But why were they bad? Why were they bad?
Um, I worked for a couple of people that just were not very nice. Like they weren't good
Yeah,
people.
right, right.
And so I knew that they didn't care about me. They didn't care about my future or my well-being. They only cared about, the here and the now and themselves and their own personal advancement. And I got out of those situations as soon as I could. But I also learned from that that's not how I wanted to be. So, I took, I didn't just have a bad experience and say, oh, I'm glad that's over. You sort of take that and repurpose it into how you want to be as a manager.
Yeah. Did you, to this day, or even back in the day, did you have specific habits or routines that help you stay motivated and driven?
As I mentioned before, I was really poor. And so, I grew up without any money and um I knew that if I didn't do well, if I didn't succeed, if I didn't get paid, I wasn't going to eat. I wasn't going to be able to pay my bills. I didn't have a safety net. So that's pretty motivational, I find. Um, so,
Fear has always been my
oh,
biggest
for
motivator.
sure. And I also, as we spoke before, like I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to be, um, I came from a really small town and, I always wanted to have more, be more, and do more. And I saw, politics was really my way to do that at a very early age. It's not one of those businesses where you have to necessarily toil away for years and years before you have opportunities. If you're hardworking and willing and there, a lot of things can come to you pretty early. And that's kind of how it worked out for me.
Hardworking, willing, and there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
what you
what
have
these
to do.
youngsters have to hear that.
Yeah.
Um,
And
yes.
and I wasn't, I mean, we were in similar positions oftentimes where, I was hired to do fundraising, but I got sent out to a campaign in Virginia and I put 4x8 yard signs. Like,
My favorite story in politics comes. I can't repeat it here. I definitely can't repeat it here. But Rich Beeson told me the story. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but
no telling.
it has to do with a donor that was just dragging you along, trying to take you for a ride. And what you said to this donor, I will never ever forget.
I
You know
think
the
I know what you're
story.
talking about.
uh,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just a member. I was like, where can I organize a Dorinda fan club? Because it was so inspirational. I mean, here was somebody who, I mean, you had it together. I always thought you had it together, Dorinda. I thought you were very organized. I thought you were very driven, and you just took no shit off of anyone. I mean, that's the perception I had of you. Um, and you know, you've done well with that.
So mission accomplished, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, no, again, I mean, the incident that you're referencing happened, very early in my tenure at the RNC and sort of back, you know, in reference to what I said earlier. I just didn't know. I didn't know that, maybe I was being too aggressive. I knew that I had a job to do, and I knew that this guy was really
You had a short
right.
time to do it, and
Yeah.
this is a special election. Would you have 6 weeks or something?
It wasn't
It was
even that. I was there for like
nothing.
3 weeks, and it
Yeah, there's just no
was,
time to dilly dally around.
yeah. And this guy was, the candidate was not aggressive on the phone, and like nobody else was going to do this. And, this guy kept jerking me around, and I wanted to make sure that he knew
That you weren't messing around.
that was not going to fly.
Yeah.
And, I would probably not say the same thing today.
Probably not.
But at the time, it seemed like the right thing to do.
Yeah. Well, for all our Cowboys Not Eggheads Patreon members, I'll tell you the story, but it's a good one. It's a good one.
It's not very PC in the 2024.
No, it is what it is. How did you, so, early on you're talking about not having any money but how did you balance your personal life with your professional life?
I didn't really have one.
Yeah.
I mean, it was work. So that was my personal life. All my friends were people that I worked with. And, I missed a lot of stuff too. I missed a lot of bachelorette parties and, class reunions. Like I'm going to my 30th class reunion in a couple weeks. But I missed the others because I was working. So I missed out on a lot of stuff, which is probably not great. But
it's called sacrifice.
It's what I did. And I mean, my best friends today are people that, that I met, during this time of my life. And I wouldn't want to trade that for anything. So, but I get asked that question a lot about when I'm talking to young people and, at finance schools and stuff, how do you have a work-life balance? And the truth of the matter is I didn't for 25 years.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I slowed down and stopped working so much that I was able to do that. So I would be delighted to hear someone else's answer to that, because I simply don't have one.
I didn't. I mean, not when I worked at RNC. I mean, I was gone. I think I was gone 100. I had, one time I had 17 states in my region, so
Yeah.
I couldn't do my job sitting behind my desk at home.
No.
And I think in 2004, I think it was 183 nights on the road or something.
Oh, I easily hit that. Yeah.
A lot. I mean, they used to call me Mr. Fischer on United Airlines, not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But they used to. Yeah, I mean, tons of Marriott points or Hilton points or whatever.
Titanium for life. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
But I would leave on Monday, come home on Tuesday night, leave again. Switch out my suitcase, leave again on Wednesday night, be gone Thursday and Friday. Sometimes be able to come home for the weekend, sometimes not. I mean, I spent so much time in Charleston, West Virginia. I had season tickets to the minor league baseball team there.
Oh, did you really? That's awesome.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. Awesome. The games were a lot of fun.
Seattle or Albuquerque. Like, it was like going to Seattle was like going to the grocery store. Just something I did.
Once a week. Yep.
Yeah. It's crazy. Sorry, I'm blind. How do you find your direction?
How did I or how do I?
How do I? How do you? Because I don't know how to find direction. I need some direction, Dorinda. Give me some direction. How do you find direction?
How do I find direction? I have to say my faith. I mean, it's not always obvious, I think. Particularly when you have complicated situations. But I lean on my faith, and what I know to be true about my Lord and Savior. And that helps me a lot. I don't always make the right choice, but I certainly strive to do that. So, yeah. I mean, when you have a lot of things to consider, like when I was in my 20s, when I was doing this gig with you guys, I didn't have anything. I had to move with my friend and give up my apartment because my cable kept getting turned off. I forgot to pay my bills because I was traveling all the time.
Didn't watch it
So
anyway.
yeah, I wasn't there anyway, so it didn't matter. But I didn't have anything. But now I have everything. So I have a fantastic husband, a lovely home, two great kids, a dog that's sleeping beside me right now, and so I have a lot of different things to consider, and my faith helps me sort that out.
Yeah, you strip it all down. That's
Hmm.
that's on your deathbed. You're not going to be thinking about some job you had
I hope not. I really do hope not.
or you didn't get or whatever.
Yeah,
Some client you didn't get or some campaign you wish you would have made a different decision on.
right.
I don't think you're gonna be thinking about any of that stuff.
I hope not. I really hope not. But you never know. I mean,
Yeah,
I haven't been on my deathbed, so um, thankfully. But
yeah. How do you handle setbacks or failure?
um,
It was
hmm.
as you know, I retired here 3 years ago, but the business was getting, it's a contact sport, clearly,
Hmm.
right? And you're right in the middle of the contact right now. You can handle it, but it, I just got so, I always describe my life in politics as a love-hate deal. I loved it a little bit more than I hated it, and it just flipped for me at
Hmm.
some point where I don't want to tolerate the BS that you've got to tolerate, you know. And so so how did I handle it? I quit. So
Same. So did I. Yeah.
uh, yeah, I'm really surprised that you got completely out of fundraising. You're one of the best fundraisers in America.
Wow, you're sweet to say that.
Well, it's
Um,
true.
I I just the 2016 cycle just crushed me.
Yeah,
And it wasn't fun anymore. It wasn't interesting. It was mean and ugly. And I just didn't have the stomach for it. So I just, thankfully I was in a position where I could do something else. And I had these, great colleagues who asked me to be a part of their new venture. And I
you
never looked back.
didn't do anything with fundraising. Yeah,
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 in fact, we don't do any politics. Everything we do is corporate or nonprofit. So
gotcha,
um, I don't have anything to do with any candidates, no campaigns, nothing.
gotcha.
And I love it. It's great because
Yeah, stress level's a little different, isn't it?
it
I mean, there's
definitely
still
is.
stress. There's still stress, but it's not so. If anything, I think that world. I mean, because I did a lot of that myself, the corporate and the public affairs and all that. Um, if anything, it's frustrating because it's almost too slow in my experience. You go from this. You go from the special election campaign where you got 3 weeks to raise X amount of dollars,
Hmm.
and everything's bam, 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 and then the corporate world sometimes it takes longer for people to make decisions because there's more people involved. And so it becomes frustrating a little bit
Hmm.
if you're trying to achieve stuff.
It can be, for sure. I mean, there's definitely a different cadence to it. But there's also I think a greater freedom associated with it as well. That you have the ability to be creative and to do things that are sort of, outside of the box or outside of expectations. Whereas, in politics, you don't necessarily have that kind of freedom. There's kind of a playbook for things, and you sort of go by that. And if for some reason you want to veer outside those lanes, there's a lot of justification you have to do. It's very risky, and again, it's typically a compressed time frame. So you have to win or lose pretty quickly, and those are pretty high stakes usually. So um, that's something that I definitely do not miss at all.
I don't even know why I'm asking this because it just came to mind, but it's something that you would understand that very few people would understand, and it's something that I've thought about recently. And there's a lot of clarity when you become retired and sober, but
I know
uh,
all about that.
um, the one or two times in my life where I experienced absolute like depression, like I want to go to sleep, I don't, was after a campaign. Um, like maybe it was the Bush campaign of 2004, maybe it was a mayor's race that was very tight that I ran and we won, but it was a deal where you're just going 500 miles an hour and everything's clicking, and boom, 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 and then the election's over and you shut off the lights and it's dark,
Hmm.
and it is depressing. It is one of the most depressing um, things I've ever lived through. Have you ever experienced that?
Um, yes.
It wasn't long term, by the way. It was, like I got a couple of nights of sleep and I was good to go. It didn't take me 16 years of therapy, but
Yeah.
I understand what depression is because it was empty.
Yeah.
It was dark. It was hopeless. Um, I don't know. I just wondered as a fellow, and you know what I'm talking about,
I
obviously. I hope
do.
you do.
I do.
Did you ever face that?
I've certainly lost more campaigns than I've won. That's for
I mean,
sure.
well, if you're in the business long enough, that's true, and anybody that
Yeah.
tells you different is full of it.
Right. But thankfully for me, some of this is just because of circumstances, and some of it kind of goes back to my impoverishedness, is that I never really had any time in between. You know, as soon as something was like, as soon as the Bush campaign was over, I started into the inaugural. As soon as the inaugural was over, I went back to the RNC. As soon as that was over, I started the Thompson campaign. As soon as that was over, I started working for Gingrich. I left there and went directly to the Senate committee. So I didn't really have any times where I could be dark because I just kind of moved. I don't necessarily recommend that. It's not a very smart way to operate.
Neither one is very smart. Well, I mean, nothing you can do to avoid. If you're on a campaign, it is what it is. You're just
Right.
it's a steamroller, and you're going 5,000
Yeah.
miles an hour, and then it's over.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what you're talking about can lead to burnout, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And you did it for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's emblematic of your expertise and your reputation that happened. I mean, nobody wanted you to be a free agent for very long, so they snagged you up.
Yeah. I mean, maybe. I mean, I was very fortunate and I had offers that I wanted to take. And I was able to work with and for some really great individuals. So I don't regret that. I will say when my oldest son, who's 9, um,
Wow.
I don't know, right? He was born 3 days before the kickoff of the Rubio campaign in 2015. So Jackson and I watched the announcement speech from our hospital bed at Sibley Hospital. But I didn't take one day off during that campaign. Like
Yeah,
I was
you
on the
can't.
phone. I was on
You
the
don't have,
phone negotiating fundraising contracts while I was in labor. Like, as soon I had a C-section, so I was in quite a bit of pain for a few weeks, but as soon as I was cleared by my doctor to drive, like I loaded him up and took him to the office. Like he was, a couple weeks old. I look back at that and I think, maybe that wasn't the right thing to do. Um, but at the time, I looked at it as, I was sort of sacrificing our present for his future. Um, and I, you know, would I recommend someone do that? Absolutely not. But at the time, I didn't feel like I had a choice. Like I had a job to do, and I was very happy to be a new mom and happy with my son, but he was just going to have to learn how to roll with it.
yeah, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. It's part of who he is. It's fine. I don't even know your son, but I guarantee he's fine.
I don't know about that. He's a little bit of a challenge, but he's
uh,
a good kid.
the other thing that I have pondered or thought about in the last couple of years is my life was defined by campaigns, as yours
Mm-hmm.
was. And so from the years of 1989 to 2021, if you name a year, what's the first thing I think about? I think
Cycle.
about, yeah, what cycle are you on?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'll just throw out a year to you, 2011. What were you doing in 2011? You
I
know
was at
exactly what you were doing.
the Senate committee.
Yeah. I mean, and so life has been defined like that for me. I'm really happy that um, hopefully the rest of my life isn't going to be defined that way. If somebody says 2024, I'm going to say, well, that's the year that my third niece was married that year. It was a great wedding. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
different. It's different now.
I think that's great. I mean, I think that's healthy. I think it's healthy to have, normal benchmarks in your life as opposed to,
A campaign you worked on.
what campaign was I working on? What bumper sticker was on my car that year? Or, how many Marriott nights did I get?
Yeah.
So I think that's healthy and good. And it's a young person's business for sure.
I
Um,
think it is. I don't know very many people. There are people I know and respect that are as older than me or still in it.
I don't know
I'm
how.
so done, dude. I'm so
I don't know
done.
how.
Yeah.
It's very, and I got to the point where I was like, I cannot call the same 50 people and ask them for the same $50,000. Like, I just can't. I just got to
Yeah.
the point where I was like, I've been calling this
Uh,
man for 25 years and he's lovely and kind and always does what I
Generous.
ask him to, but I'm just tired of asking him. Like, I just want to, I want to do something else with my time and my life. And all the sacrifices that I made during the Bush years were absolutely worth it because I believe in what I was doing.
Well,
I
I
believe
mean,
in
look,
George
some of the
W.
best.
Bush.
Yeah. That Bush campaign in 2004 was the best. Some of the best memories that I have.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get the cart in front of the horse, but there may be a podcast about the 20th anniversary of that, maybe this season. We'll see.
Ooh. I'll
Um,
be sure to
but
tune
it
in for
was
that.
it was the best time. I mean, it was I was on the ground. I wasn't raising money at that point. I was a field director for Nevada, and thanks to people like you, we had money to work with, and money gives you options,
Mm-hmm.
like
Sure does.
options to win or options to lose. But you know, as I've always said about great fundraisers, and I think I may have said this in a finance school or two, and that is for every 10 jackasses that know how to spend money, there's only one that knows how to raise it. And I
That's
think
right.
you and I are part of that club, and I'm proud of that club.
Yeah.
So, you
It's
know,
an elite group.
it is. I agree. I agree. Um, I can't. You've mentioned a little bit, but I don't want to wrap up this podcast without talking about what it's like to be a mom.
It's exhausting. Um, it's great most of the time. Um,
You have two sons.
I have
Jackson
two
is
sons.
nine, right? Is that his name, Jackson?
Jackson is
And
9.
William, is that his?
William is
My
4.
my brother's name is William. Will, yeah.
William is named for my husband's uncle Billy, who was a, a character, as one might say. And my youngest son certainly fits his namesake's bill.
Is he still
Um,
is he still William or
he's
uh,
William. I've
he's
tried
William?
to I've tried to get Billy going, but it just hasn't stuck yet. We
But
kind of refer to him as Wild Bill because he's a bit of a wild card.
gotcha.
He's a huge Swiftie. He's obsessed with Taylor Swift. Um,
That is so interesting, isn't it?
I don't even- so I don't know. He's just his own little character. And Jackson's kind of a jock. I mean, he loves sports. He plays football and baseball, and he's a great golfer. He's been playing competitive golf for the last couple years.
Good for him. Gonna retire
Yeah,
mom and dad, baby. Get on the PGA circuit. That's awesome.
they're both true lefties, which is also kind of interesting. But you know, they keep me really busy and trying to sort of meet their needs and take care of them while taking care of other things is a challenge. And you know, I never really thought I would have kids, because I didn't really want to. But you know, once I met my husband and we were decided we were going to get married, I was like, okay, well, this makes sense. I didn't want to just have like these nameless, faceless, generic children, you know, in my 20s, but specifically wanted to have a family with him, and it was hard. I mean, my first Jackson was born, I was 39. You know, I was 44 when William was born, and that was, you know, a long, sort of challenging process to get there with him. We had, you know, 3 losses, and you know,
I'm glad you're blessed with it. Heather and I waited till later years, and it was, you know,
it
it
was
is what it
hard.
is. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Um, I was just too busy working at RNC, I guess. I'll blame them.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of the same way, and you know, with Jackson it was very easy and it came quickly, and he was very healthy, and I was miserable being pregnant, but like I was healthy too. And then when it came time for the second one, it was just not as easy.
Like, probably not gonna be a third, huh?
Sadly, no. You know, I'll be 50 next year, so
I can't even believe that. But then I look at my own age and think, what
I
happened?
know,
But yeah,
right? That's crazy. But so Wild Bill is the caboose, and we're happy with that. And it's great. We have a ton of fun. I mean, these kids crack me up constantly. But they also kind of drive me crazy. But that's
but you had a good experience
yeah. I mean, it's
from
not
before. From
right.
before, deal with all
Yeah.
these other idiots.
Yeah, I've been dealing with, you know, man children for years, so
Exactly.
it's not anything new. But you know, I think some people try to sort of paint this picture of motherhood that it's all, you know, earth goddess lovely, and
Not with 2 boys. It's not.
you know,
It's
it's
poop
so
and puke, right? I
it's
mean,
nurturing and it's all of these things, and it is, but it's also, you know, a lot of fart jokes and, you know, a lot of I don't want to do that, and I refuse to brush my teeth, and I'm absolutely wearing Crocs, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like that's all part of it too. So and being an older mom, it's like physically it's demanding. And
you gotta
it's
be in
not
shape.
that,
Yeah.
you know, that's not something that I kind of did the math on
Yeah.
before. It wouldn't have changed, you know, my mind about it, but it was not something I was, you know, really prepared for. And giving birth at 44 is like, as my doctor said, there's a reason people do this at 20 and not 40.
I'll finish with this. A
So,
Carol Burnett joke that I always thought was funny was that giving birth is like pulling your lower lip over your head. So, but I'm bummed.
yeah. Well, and Jackson weighed 10 pounds when he was
Oh,
born. So, it was let's call it a struggle. And
well, good.
yeah, right.
Well, I
Why would
knew
I do
you.
that again?
Dorinda, I appreciate your time and your
Oh,
friendship.
it's always my pleasure.
Let's let's talk more often.
I'm very happy for you that the Cornhuskers are
Ha! National news that you know about
back,
the
baby.
Huskers.
Yeah. I'm a Big Ten gal now, you
Easy,
know.
easy on the back thing. I mean, we won 3 straight games, and everybody says, "Oh, they've turned the page." Like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Listen,
We'll
I
see. We got to win
Vanderbilt
tomorrow night.
University, I mean, we're 2-1 right now, which is
I
a big
love
deal, but
Vanderbilt. Do you know I give money to Vanderbilt every year
do you
because
really?
I do because they have my mother died with a thing called multiple system atrophy, and
Uh-huh.
they are the lead researcher in that horrendous, debilitating disease. And so
Oh,
we have a little fund for her that we give every year. So
that's
when
terrific.
Vandy was in the College World Series, I was pulling for him and
Oh
stuff,
yeah.
and I I knew you're sort of connected with them, so
Yeah, that's great.
uh, yeah.
I think
Well,
about you every time I see The Huskers. I mean, my
Go
husband's
Big
a
Red.
big Michigan
Michigan.
fan. So I'm sort of fallen into this land of the Big Ten, which I was not familiar with before. And so I'm paying a little more
Well,
attention to it.
they don't play in Lincoln this year, but if Michigan comes to Lincoln, I'd like to invite both of you to come. We'll do it upright.
Oh my gosh. My son is the bigger, he's crazy about Michigan. Jeff took him to the Big House last year,
I've been there. It's
for
incredible.
he went with the Congressman John James had a fundraiser up there. And so Jackson went with them, and they were having this dinner the night before the game, and it was all these, sort of 40 and 50-year-old white guy lobbyists. And Jackson was like holding court with them, talking about, he was going through the stats and all the players, and he said they're gonna be undefeated this season, and they're gonna win the national championship. And everybody laughed at him. They said,
Good
"Oh,
for him.
this kid's so funny, so great." And so Congressman James bet him. He was like, "Okay, if they do that, then I'll give you a private tour of the Capitol."
Ooh, rock and roll.
So,
I've never even had one of those.
so that was Jackson's prediction for. It was the second game of the season. It was UNLV or something. So it was early on, but
he'll never forget it for the rest of his life. It's awesome.
no, he won't. He's super into it. And we've moved on to following all of these Michigan players in the NFL now. So now we're Vikings fans and Steelers fans and
I wouldn't
all that
recommend
stuff.
this show. I wouldn't recommend this show for Jackson. Maybe your husband likes it, but Bussin' with the Boys podcast, which is Taylor Lewin from Michigan, and then Will Compton from Nebraska. It is
Oh yeah?
and all they talk about is Michigan and Nebraska football. It's great. You gotta check it.
Okay.
I wouldn't recommend it for Jackson. Probably
Salty
not
language?
Yes, but it's
Yeah.
funny. It's very good.
Okay.
So
Bussin' with
check
the
it out.
Boys. I'm
You're
always up
welcome,
for a new
Will Compton.
podcast.
Well, I appreciate it. If you'll hold on just a second after I hit stop here, because I got to get the thing to